I was like, weren't we calling Samantha something else? Because wasn't her name legally? And that heifer changed her name.
In Judaism, the biggest altruistic moment you can have, or the biggest mitzvah you can have, is holding as a pallbearer, because it's a gift you give to someone you can never get back.
Welcome to Come Back with Erica Cobb. We are doing something a little different today because we are doing episode 3 of the Harry and Meghan on Netflix recap with my girl, my co-host on Daily Blast Live, Tory Shulman.
Hello, everyone. And by the way, I'm wearing these crowns not to represent the monarchy, to represent the queen and all of us.
Oh, okay. All right, Queen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see you, Queen. Okay, so we've already gone through episode 1 and 2. Thank you all for your feedback.
For real.
It's really great to hear from you. Even if you don't agree with us, I think a respectful discourse is very important. But I think some things are a little less debatable than others.
I agree with you. That's a very good way of saying it, diplomatic.
Thank you. Okay, so again, we are recording in my home, so it might sound a little different than episode 1, but we are in front of the fireplace.
Look
We
how
have a
cute this
fireplace chat. For those of you who are listening, just check out social media and you'll get a vibe for how we're doing things today. But we are going to start with another sit down, the engagement interview. We talked about their giddiness, the green dress. I know this is a crazy question, but where were you when you watched that interview?
In my bed.
Yeah.
I was in my bed and I was like, oh, you mean when I first watched it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Back in 2017.
That's a great question. I don't know if I remember, but I remember thinking, I'm just glad that they're so close.
Yeah.
Where were you?
I was in our condo at the time, and I remember like watching it and then like trying to go to the kitchen, which was right next to the couch, but I couldn't like get over there, and like I didn't want to miss anything. And I felt like so excited. And like I think a part of it, it's interesting that she was wearing the green dress.
Tell me why you keep bringing that up.
Because I think that there are times when I'm watching this documentary and I'm watching her, and there is an envy there. There's an envy for...
Oh, I need to take a drink.
Yeah,
Green with envy.
Yeah, and I think envy is something that I am very attracted to and drawn to, because not that envy is the same as jealousy in this context.
Correct.
It's envy, and I think it was is it Glennon Doyle?
I love Miss Doyle.
On her TED Talk, she said envy is the thing that takes you in the direction of where your heart really wants to go. And I thought for someone who was really at the pinnacle, or really the precipice of where her life could potentially go, I was envious of that. Like,
how interesting.
I want that feeling.
I know,
you know?
Absolutely.
So I thought the green was interesting.
I will say this, colors of her outfit came up again and again in a way that if you are any kind of fashion person or costumer or wardrobe, we'll talk about it, was fascinating.
Yeah.
She was very, let's say, deliberate about her wardrobe.
Yes.
Which I
yes.
love. It was very interesting.
So we learn that the announcement when she's wearing the cream coat, and he's wearing the suit, was immediately before the sit-down interview.
Right.
And I thought that was a lot.
I had no idea. Imagine how much he's like, that's a lot of smiling, you know?
Yeah, and then Harry said in the interview that Meghan and Princess Diana would have been best friends.
I know.
And I really felt that.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like they would have been girls.
And I think Diana would have had few friends, and Meghan would have been a perfect one. She would not have had many, and very few people would have been accepted into that circle, and Meghan was that special.
Yeah.
It was a very good pairing.
So we pan back to today, and Harry says, "We've never been asked our story. That's the consistency." And Meghan says, "Until now." And Liz Garber, Garbus, the documentarian, says, "I guess that's why we're here." So we get into the opener. I have a question. This might be not controversial, but I need to know. Does the intro to this documentary give you Succession vibes?
A lot.
Succession, as if you don't know, for those of you who haven't watched it on HBO.
No.
It is about a family
based on the Murdoch family.
Yeah. and the idea of power and privilege and all of these things that are happening inside their castle, so to speak. And I was like, that was a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it reminded me of like, it was the firm level. It sounded like the firm. Yeah, great sounds, great. It just was like, welcome to this monarchy in itself. I thought that was interesting too.
So we get into the beginning of episode 3, and David Olusoga, who's the author of Black and British, said, "Who dreamed that Britain would have a black princess?
Right.
Who could have conceived that? It was a conclusion to a history that was so improbable as to be astonishing." And I really, and the idea that he said it was a conclusion, like this was going to be wrapped up in this bow, in this reckoning. And then
Reckoning
we hear,
is a great word.
yeah, about the role that Britain played in world history and who has paid the price in all of this.
It was bad.
Yeah, so
It was bad.
you're a historian. You really understand, historical context. What did you make of the way that they talked about Britain and their participation and facilitation of the slave trade?
Many people, including myself for a long time, didn't know that even Britain had a slave trade. It seemed very American. You learned it when all that happened. And you see sort of the British and you think, oh, that didn't happen. If you are to have an empire, which they did, and by the way, one of the biggest the world has ever seen, you need an infrastructure, and which becomes labor. And what happens is the subservience of a group of people over the other, and also the taking of another culture over the other, like the rape, the pillaging, I mean, we talk about that a lot in like the Columbus Day debate. This happened also in Britain, but to many other places, and some of which are still under their control,
Right.
which is like a bizarre moment to feel. So it is unlike an empire we know of. It's not like, we don't know the Ottoman Empire. We don't know about the Han Dynasty, all that. But this was, the foundation and the backbone came from people of color who were never at the level of those that were in power, ever.
Right.
Ever. The power dynamic has never shifted until like this moment, and it was like a whoa, dude.
You know, I thought that it was so eye-opening how they really laid it out, that as opposed to the Deep South in America, where people, my ancestors made it to Chicago because first of all, I had a great uncle Amos who joined the Union soldiers on a path to freedom during the Civil War.
Wow.
And that's when our last name changed, because the ownership of our people changed from the Thompsons to the Cobbs.
Holy macro.
So there are so many stories of people, and one, finding their path to freedom, and it's so intimate because we're in the same country, it's the same continent, whereas Britain, all of that was outsourced,
Spread out,
to the Caribbean, to Jamaica, to what we now refer to as the Commonwealth.
Right.
And what we really learn about the Commonwealth, because Queen Elizabeth made it her mission to keep the Commonwealth together.
It was so important to her.
Well, of course, because without the Commonwealth, they lose their wealth. This wealth is not common at all.
That's a great way of saying it.
It really
Talk about the
isn't.
jewels,
Yeah, it really isn't. 1807, slavery was abolished. 1830, the slave empire was abolished. And then I thought this was so important, and I want to make sure that I credit the right person. But they talked about the idea that this is just 2.0 for colonization. It's the Empire 2.0. And that was, we heard from, I know we referenced a few people, the very first, Kehinde Andres, who is the author of The New Age of the Empire. He talked about the Commonwealth has not changed a thing. They just got better PR. And that Black people in the Commonwealth, the conditions are just about as bad as they were 50 to 100 years ago.
There's a vision of London and Britain that it's like this like very cosmopolitan, multiracial place. And that discounted that in a way that I didn't know. I didn't understand.
Yeah, I think Afua Hirsch,
Yeah,
that's who we
I
talked
liked
about,
her, a
episode
great reporter,
1,
yeah.
journalist and author of The British. She said those in Britain continue to be intergenerationally wealthy, while those whose wealth was extracted continue to be intergenerationally poor.
Yeah, I thought that it's carrying through. And they do a good job, might I add. If you're like, what's a brochure for London? I would say like multiracial, very diverse, everyone's like happy, and there's not that much like I don't picture racism the same as I do in America.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, when kale got popular,
Right.
kale got like so, you know what I'm talking about? It was like PR was done in a way that made you feel like there wasn't a economic gap, and there was,
Right.
and there was.
And there's a vast economic
Huge.
gap. And the idea that, you know, so often when we talk about history, and I know one of our co-hosts, Al Jackson, says this so brilliantly, it's like it's a very aesthetic representation, because you see a black and white photo and you're like, oh, that was 200 years ago.
So long ago.
And it wasn't 200 years
Dude,
ago.
it was like 40 years ago.
Like, yeah, it was like when your parents were in high school.
Yes, it's exactly right.
You learn that, you know, in the 1970s is really when the monarchy chose to have people from the Caribbean come over in order to pay them low-paying
Could you believe
service
this?
wage jobs.
Dude,
yes.
they hired a workforce for low wages from their Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And that's who I thought was this diverse group of people.
Right.
That I believed in. And I'm someone who studied in Oxford.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm so happy this is like, I was duped in a way. Did not know that about the workforce.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it has to do with, let's talk about these words, critical race theory.
C-R-T.
Okay? Yes,
I was
is
thinking
very
about that
important.
in last episode too.
Critical race theory needs to be a priority all over the globe.
That's right.
Because what we hear from is a former spokesperson from the monarchy, and now he works for Archewell, said that he didn't even learn of the history of slavery.
No, he didn't even know. That's right.
Didn't
That's
even
right.
know. And that it wasn't Afua. I just want to make sure that I'm stating
I
the
like
right
that
person.
you take the time to get that right.
David Alusoga said that his education started at abolition.
Wow.
That the time of slavery and how this entire trade of goods and resources and the reallocation of wealth, is to put it mildly,
Right.
The robbery of other countries, that part was never a part of a history lesson.
Wow.
It just started, because why? Because people don't want their ancestors to feel bad about, or their children to feel bad that their ancestors were a part of this entire situation. No one wants their wealth that they haven't physically been a part of taking from someone else.
They don't want to feel guilty about that wealth.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think a lot of it has to do with how we're feeling, or how we want certain people to be made to feel, versus what actually happened. And what do we know about history when we don't discuss it? We're destined to repeat it.
Agreed. And I think the truth doesn't have feelings. The truth is truth. I also just want to say history, and I've learned this from Michigan, University of Michigan, history is written by the winners. And if you continue that and don't give, again, that single story, if you don't give a prism of what actually happened, you have given yourself an enormous handicap.
Absolutely.
Huge.
Absolutely.
Handicap.
You're listening to Come Back with Erica Cobb. I'm with my girl, Tory Shulman, and we are breaking down episode 3 of Harry and Meghan on Netflix. So we get to just months before the wedding, and they talk about the walkabout.
The promenade.
Yes. And
We did
they
that walk
say-
when I visited.
Yeah, because
lovely.
again, Tori, and just to clarify, she didn't actually physically attend the royal wedding. You
I
went
kind of
cover
wanted to.
it.
Yeah, I covered it. I wanted to, but yeah, we went to Windsor, where it was held at, and we went before, a couple days before, took the walkabout, took the promenade, and people were getting ready, and it was very exciting.
Yeah, there was a part where one of the royal watchers just yelled out, "Go mixed kids."
Right?
Which I was like,
Like, how transparent is it?
it was just so, because especially for Meghan, never really having a sense of her identity, like not being black enough, not being white enough, not having roles that were inclusive of someone who is biracial, and someone's looking at her, an onlooker saying, go mix kids. Like, it was almost like, we made it.
It's finally
Yes.
here. I agree with you. Whenever I talk about the Holocaust on the show, I never thought of myself as someone that is like a anti-Semitic kind of spokesperson. But the response I've gotten, and maybe she didn't know it, would be, I'm now going to occupy that space. And I've been like very proud to do so.
Yeah. And you do it very well. It's like, I think that when people see anyone in a forward-facing position.
Right, forward-facing, that's a good way of saying it.
It becomes like, this was what you were intended to do.
Not at all.
And for Meghan, she just happened to fall in love with somebody
Totally.
who lived this life.
Exactly.
And then she had to make a decision about who she was going to be and how she was going to utilize and really use her platform responsibly.
And her resources
Right.
from what she knew. Yeah, she adapted beautifully.
Which is what anyone who's forward facing for the most part. I mean, when you talk about, you've said so many amazing things about, pop culture relative to the history of Jewish people and the Holocaust. And truth be told, when we first auditioned to be on daytime television, you got hired because you were a comedian.
Totally, and I was all,
Right.
Hey.
And I was hired because I was a radio girl.
Totally.
And they were looking for personalities.
Absolutely.
They weren't looking for the next activist of X, Y, and Z. And I think that you either take on this role and think of it as a privilege.
That's exactly
and think
right.
about how you can help others
That's right.
with this platform. Or you do what I think has been historically the case, not that the royal family hasn't done anything for other people, but there certainly was a disparity between the way that William and Kate.
I was just going to bring them up. Let's talk about, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Just such a different style. And I will say that with many, many concepts of what subtext I mean by style.
Yeah.
A very different couple.
And we see how different Harry and Meghan operate. And I think that, obviously William has another incentive because he's actually in line for the throne.
And just to be clear, like there's just, it's the heir and the spare, the heir and the spare. And so one person was raised to be different than the other. And that's only fair to William that we give him that credit, that he was raised to be in a different route.
Yeah.
And that's fair. You are going to act differently if you knew you were the spare, as opposed to, I got to get everything together.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
The royal, we talked about Daniel Martin, Daniel Martin was the makeup artist in The Friend, which I loved because they've been together for 10 years.
I love him. I follow him on Insta. He's great.
Yeah.
He's
I was
so
like,
good.
oh my gosh, like, can you just imagine?
He's so excited to be in it.
But it's also the intimacy between, we have our Jeray Daniel.
It's like a Jeray, isn't it?
And, we've been with Jeray for 6 years, and now it's at the point where,
friend.
we travel together, and he comes over for dinner.
Right.
It's like he's like my little brother.
He's like part of your family.
Yeah, like my son, my nephew. So it's like as we transition into different spaces, it's natural that you have these people who really understand every season of you.
Correct.
But there was a royal correspondent who said the extension of the royal family is to lend credibility to particular members of the media. So they really broke down this idea of the royal correspondents and how they become. And they made a big deal about saying, can anyone be a royal correspondent?
Right.
So how did you feel about Harry breaking down the role of the royal correspondent?
That it was just more of a business. I just didn't realize how orchestrated it was. If you guys don't understand, it isn't like I'm in LA and call me at the club. It's like for real, if you're a royal correspondent, you're like a partner in a firm, and I don't know how else to explain it, but it's it is so interconnected that it's vastly different than what we have here, vastly different. And it's interesting who you get close to and who you trust and who you don't as well. Because I know Diana was kind of trashed by certain royal correspondents.
Right, and I think that's important.
You know what I mean?
It's a pool of media. They are sort of ordained.
Yeah, they're like sainthood.
Yeah, the monarchy and British media. And the stories that they write hold more weight
than everybody
the
else.
others.
It's like a verified check mark, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right?
That's
they got a blue
exactly.
check mark, don't they? You just take them more seriously.
And if you go against them, there was one point where they said, we pay, you pose, that the Royal Rota, R-O-T-A, system, that certain media are allocated to cover members of the royal family. And their, like, basically their thought process is, this family is ours to exploit. So when you see, like, the idea of Harry, when at one point one of the photographers said, he doesn't perform for us anymore.
Yes. Didn't
Like,
that
he
feel
was
very
a
minstrel?
circus monkey.
There was a minstrel take to that, wasn't there? In a way of the African American history of that, of like, he's dance.
I
was like, dang.
It felt like that because when you put Meghan beside him,
interesting.
knowing the context, then it became, and first of all, let me just pause and say that when I was referring to the monk, like dance monkey, I was referring to it as a colloquialism,
and
I was not referring to it racially,
like a slur the way it was used.
Exactly,
yes, exactly.
Because last time somebody said something like that to me, he got kicked in the balls.
I know, I've heard
that was
story.
my senior year in high school.
You were just in
and
high
I
school.
almost wasn't allowed to graduate. Interesting, or walk across for graduation. Interesting that nothing was done to him, but they held me up from potentially walking the stage after being called that. So I take that very seriously, and I just want to make sure that people understand that that wasn't the message.
I appreciate that.
But the idea that they would not, that they were giving them information, they're going with this information, and now the people who have exploited his family, exploited his mother,
killed his mother,
right, telling him to perform.
Right.
And they have to just go through this system.
Right.
And what they're really saying is that you aren't honoring the invisible contract between the media and the British monarchy. Afua Hirsch talked about the idea that Prince William and Prince Harry were the first to come up in the system of the invisible contract, and that perhaps there needs to be ramifications for that. So in my mind, I thought this was just the way that it always was.
No, they were the guinea pigs.
Which
they are the guinea pigs.
Explains so much.
Yeah, exactly.
It explains so much.
It's like we're watching a societal experiment as it's happening. You know when you guys have, rats in a maze or whatever it is, and you're watching, we all think that happened long ago, but it is. And what's so weird is that William does the maze, and he goes left and right, and he does it. And Harry stepped out of the maze.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Some people think outside the box. It's hard to think I can walk out of the maze. That's crazy.
That was probably one of the most shocking things to me.
Yeah.
Because I assume that this has been going on for
forever.
generations.
No.
And it makes sense that it hasn't because of the way that press has been modernized.
And let me just say this very quickly, and this is super important. Elizabeth was the first monarch ever to televise her coronation, ever. It was put on black and white TV. She had the foresight to recognize that television was the new monarch. Was the new medium. So not only is press being updated in their lifetime, it started almost with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And then it got heavier. Interesting.
The idea that if they didn't perform, they were punished with harsher
Stories.
headlines.
Oh my God. What a blackmail situation.
You're listening to Come Back with Erica Cobb. We are breaking down episode 3 of the Harry and Meghan Netflix special. I am with Tory Shulman, and we've just gotten back to Meghan's mom, Doria Ragland, and she talked about, we see footage of the paparazzi chasing her. She talks about how she felt unsafe. She was offered money. Her telling the paparazzi that is my child.
I was just gonna say, that's my child. She
like
was like
she's
shocked.
not for sale.
Yeah, she was like that shocked that they'd even asked. That's my child.
Yeah.
I thought that was lovely.
But on the flip side, I thought this was the way that Meghan said this so diplomatically was that basically they were expecting her mother's side of the family to be the ones who created the circus.
Correct.
And it turned out it was her father's side of the family. So basically they wanted the black side of her family to show their ass.
Right.
And
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, they wanted to show, because
I
then
didn't think about that.
that would have sold more,
Man,
as
I didn't
opposed
think
to the
about
white
that.
side of the family who showed their ass.
Erica Cobb, I did not think about that.
I always thought about it because I was holding my breath, like, Lord, please
don't be that side.
please. Because this is all they want. It's all they want.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and so now we get into the dynamics of Meghan's family. So we already know that her and her mother left when she and her father divorced when she was 2. And we are introduced through Meghan's narrative
Finally.
to Sister Samantha recently changed back to Markle. Now, I clocked this early. I clocked this before the royal wedding even happened. I was like, weren't we calling Samantha something else? Because wasn't her name legally? And that heifer changed her name. Changed her name back to Markle.
Talk about
when her sister got engaged.
profiting.
That is wild. Now, we know now that Samantha is 17 years older than Meghan, and that it had been over a decade since the two of them had last seen each other for more than just an hour and a half, according to Meghan, and that Meghan and her father left her father, or Meghan and her mother left her father when she was 2, so she really didn't have a relationship, which makes a ton of sense because my sister and I are almost 7 to 8 years apart, and our relationship is very different than the relationship I have with my younger brother because we were in high school at the same time
Totally
together.
different. Absolutely.
You know, we were in elementary school at the same time together. By the time I turned 18, I left the home. My sister was only 10.
Yes, way different.
Yeah, and so then I went on my whole like young adult thing. I wasn't necessarily, raised the same as my sister was. Now, we weren't estranged, but I could see how if you already have a family that's clearly estranged, and I'm speaking about her father's side of the family,
right,
how having a 17-year difference between your younger sibling would create a more space.
Right. I mean, the famous line from that is, I didn't even know her middle name.
Right.
I didn't even know her middle name. You got to understand, that's a lack of intimacy. That's just a lack of trust. That's a lack of being with the person. That's weird. That says it all. You know what I'm saying? That says it all. If you don't know that, then you're not, I'm not saying you're not family, but there isn't the familial connections that we all have.
Right. Exactly.
I thought that was well said.
And then we're introduced to Ashley Hale, who's Meghan's niece.
This was interesting.
And I thought that painted a picture of, I understand I am not going to disparage people who have, issues and aren't able to keep their children. As those of you who've listened to my podcast for quite some time, you know that my husband and I are CASA volunteers. We have had, family groups up to 5 siblings where the children have been removed from their home. So I have a lot in my heart for that.
No judgment here, right?
Right. But I think Ashley really painted the picture that she was adopted by her paternal grandparents since she was 2 years old. She lived with them. She hadn't seen Samantha since she was 6. She refers to her biological mother as Samantha, and that they reconnected again in 2007. So the idea that Ashley wasn't able to attend the wedding based on her proximity to her biological mother. How do you feel about this? Because there's been a lot of flack
about that. Yeah,
a lot of flack.
There's been a lot of flack about this because this, if you didn't know that Ashley became her really close friend. They were very, very close. And for Meghan, that's not easy to let people in. And unfortunately, she wasn't allowed at the wedding. And a lot of people had a lot to say about this. Was she saying, don't come because you're Samantha Markle's daughter? I mean, there was a lot to say about this. I will just say I felt a lot of empathy for her and the hurt that she felt.
Yeah.
I also felt bad for Meghan, but you can have duality of thought. I saw a lot of I felt she felt a lot of hurt.
Yeah.
That was a hurt person.
Well, of course.
In a strong way. Your best friend, because of so many reasons, can't have you at the wedding. And that was a tricky one, I thought.
Well, first of all, I believed the depth of their relationship because...
Very strong.
Yeah, clearly Meghan grew up as an only child.
Yeah.
And she talked about being alone all the time.
Loneliness was a big thing. You're absolutely right.
And so the idea
for both of them.
Yeah, that she found out that they found Samantha's daughter, Ashley.
And she was so excited.
She reached out to her and I thought, she's this working actress, like
she didn't have to do that.
Right. She has all of these quite affluent, like, kick butt friend. I mean, she's besties with Serena Williams.
They were like boss. They were all boss, and she wanted to find more about her.
Her family, because she didn't have a big family, and that's something she always wanted.
Right.
So for that reason of her reaching out to Ashley to begin with, that's something that she extended herself to do.
Yeah.
And I thought that really said something about who she was as a person and where her value systems lie. And I don't believe that it was her idea not to invite Ashley to the wedding.
I feel you're right, but can I ask you a question? If they said, we think it's better Ashley doesn't come because of the Markle controversy, and maybe she couldn't, and again, give her that credit. Again, it's the monarchy. Should she have pushed back and like tried harder to fight for her friend to be there? Or was that just a non-possibility or an impossibility?
I'm questioning at that point.
Do you know what I'm saying? I wanted her to, like, in the story of my life, I wanted her to push harder.
Right. No, and I would have wanted that too.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of regret for not doing that.
1,000,000%.
But also, it seemed as though, like, this all happened very quickly.
Intensely.
From meeting to engagement. I mean, some people are together for a decade before they're even having a conversation about, like, do we know each other enough? Like, they're learning things in real time. This was an expedited process. So I do believe that there was a part of both of them at that point that was trusting of the institution, that they would have their back, that they were making decisions that were in their best interest.
Yeah.
And if that was a decision that needed to be made, because you have to keep in mind, Samantha is over here tweeting. She's on.
She was insane.
With PP Morgan. She's like doing all the things in order to get as much attention and profit off of, the princess pushy pants, like all of these things. So I'm just wondering if someone within the institution, within the firm, said, this is just going to bring more of that.
Oh, I'm sure of it. But at the same time, can I say, it does not feel concluded. This situation does not feel ended between the two. There is a rawness to this that has not been ended.
Yeah.
And I felt really crappy for both.
Yeah.
But I really felt like she, it's like when you're not, it's any girl, you're not invited to your best friends, your family's wedding, that's gotta hurt. It doesn't matter who she is. That's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
That's gotta hurt.
Well, and then also just the idea that they had become so close and people clearly had to have known that. And no one's talking about the questions that Ashley endured about not attending the wedding. I'm sure everyone would have assumed that she would have.
Right.
But
including her.
Right. But then also, I think that you're right. There are a lot of raw emotions and feelings coming from Ashley about that still. But I do think that relationship is either on the mend or in the process of mending has been mended.
I hope so.
Because of the affection that Ashley clearly still speaks of Meghan about, or the way she speaks about her.
I don't know. I felt like that hadn't been concluded. I felt like she really loved her and was trying to express that there, but I felt some conversation had not been had. But that was just an insight I had.
Yeah, but she does blame it on her. She's like, because of who my biological mother is.
And she gets that, but I think as a friend, that's hurtful.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, that was hard. That was a weird moment. That was a hard moment.
Yeah. Okay, Tori, I'm going to stop down on the Ashley Hale, Meghan's niece situation, because I feel like you have unresolved issues with
I think it might be a thing with me.
Let's unpack that.
I'm just saying, I think there was a resignation, or if that's not a word, whatever it is, with being left out. And I also felt like as if Meghan realized this was the first big sacrifice she would have to make. And I just felt the hurt from Ashley. I don't know. There might have been just a connection there.
Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with Tory or our relationship, Tory is a huge sufferer of FOMO, the fear of missing out.
1,000,000%. Do you think that's what it was?
I think, well, and I think for good reason.
For sure.
I think sometimes, there's a deeper reason. Sometimes people just don't want to miss out because they want to be a part of a party.
No, I want it because of the connection.
Yeah, people don't want to miss out because because they don't want to feel like they're not included in the connection that brings people together.
Yeah.
So I can
felt
see,
for her.
yeah, I can see you feeling that on a very deep level.
That's fair. That's a valid point.
Well, but I also felt it. I didn't feel it the same way. Well, I'm being honest. I didn't feel it the same way, but I did feel it because I'm like, 2 billion people watched this wedding, and it was like the event of. It was such a big event that Piers Morgan cried about not getting an invite.
Dude, he was so sad. The little baby.
I know.
The
Poor boo-boo.
little baby.
Poor boo-boo.
Poor boo-boo.
He really thought he'd be there. Yeah, but so I can understand when the whole world is watching your best friend in the world and
Dude,
you're not there.
that's a hard thing
like,
to take.
It is. And then
For no fault of your own.
exactly. I also felt like, what is the make good on something like that?
Wait, what does that mean?
Like, how do you reconcile?
That's what I think. I think that conversation has not happened.
It had to have happened
I don't
if they're
think so.
having this conversation.
No,
in the
because I think they
documentary.
genuinely have affection for each other from the past. And they both brought honor to that relationship. And they did it beautifully, as two strong women did. But the end of that relationship has not occurred yet. It's like winter is coming. They need to have that conversation, and it has not happened yet. And there was a sense of guilt, I felt, and maybe I'm totally projecting, on Meghan for not having had her invited. I think there was a sense of guilt. Now, it could, again,
Yeah.
FOMO could be reading into this, but that was the strongest female friendship she had of support before she walked into that, and she just let it go. There's got to be a sense of like, I wish I had her there.
Okay, and I'm not trying to be a didn't get an invite to the wedding apologist here.
Totally.
But I'm just trying to think of the other side of that, because anytime anyone has a wedding, most of the time you hear about bridezillas and, angsty mothers and all of these things. And Harry and Meghan are having this amplified to the nth degree, because while all of this is going on with the invite and all of that, when Meghan talked about reaching out to her father and
this
learning
was crazy.
everything
This
through the
was
tabloids and TMZ and not getting a response back, and then finally getting a response back that didn't seem
right
in tune with the way that he would normally respond. And then also my heart dropped in the moment that she said, Dad, are you selling images, or are you, giving stories to the media? And he said no. And when they got off the phone and she said she looked at Harry and said, I don't know, for some reason, I don't believe him. And I was like, oh my gosh, man.
That was hard because, and again, I thought they weren't invested in each other. I thought they were estranged.
Right.
But to know that they had been that close all the way up to that moment, we're talking 5 days before the wedding, they're still texting. And here's what I'll never forget. Please, Dad, please talk to me. She thought he was hurt.
Yeah.
She thought there was a heart issue. And to say, please talk to me. And then he wrote back something and calling her Meghan.
Yeah.
Not calling her Meg. And all of a sudden the phone was compromised. And what I thought was so interesting is the next text was, this is Harry. I need you to write me back because we're concerned. What a lovely thing to see him jump in and try and protect her. But my God, it's not just anyone. It's not your second cousin.
Right.
It's your dad.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's like 48 hours before he walks you down the aisle. I thought all of this was way before that they had said, the pain of that is so raw. As you're walking down the aisle, and who's walking down? Prince Charles. That's got to be so confusing.
So that's a part of the reason why, I'm thinking that might explain the feeling or the temperature of everything that was happening, because also what's really kind of being insinuated is that the phone was compromised, and that side of the family, which would presumably be, because remember, Samantha was all, my father,
of course,
whatever.
Of course.
So by saying, okay, he's been compromised.
Right.
Clearly, she's been compromised.
1,000%.
So can, someone up in the tower,
This
I'm just making
mystical tower.
Yeah, or, in the firm being like, we can't chance someone from that circle
Oh, of course.
coming.
So
I could see that
100%.
being because it was such a big scandal that someone in her family would have cooperated and sold stories to the press. which also is so ironic because the whole time that's exactly what Harry's family's doing.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't even think about that. With the media, they're selling their own souls. That's so funny.
Oh my gosh, this isn't funny.
No, it's not funny. It's deeply serious.
It is serious.
But what's interesting too, and I just want to say this again, I'm a daddy's girl. You're somewhat, I mean, you really are.
My father and I cool,
Yeah, you and Roosevelt are cool. No. And like, I don't know, just seeing the words that she wrote to him that was like, please, Dad, write me back. And he like wouldn't. What did it take for him to end that? What did it take for him to cut that umbilical cord with his daughter, who was close? I really was shocked by the closeness of their relationship. I had no idea, and how hurt she must have. Imagine her walking down the aisle with this weirdo she doesn't really know, whoever, her father-in-law is coming out, and you're in front of everyone. All you want is your daddy.
Yeah.
Right next to you, and he sold you out.
Yeah.
Right before, I was really taken by that. I thought they had not talked for a long time, but she was betrayed, stabbed right before she walked down the aisle.
It's so short-sighted.
It is.
Like,
it's like Shakespearean.
It's so, like, I remember having a conversation with someone who I did believe was a friend. I thought this person would be
harsh.
a lifer.
Oh, man.
And the way they betrayed me in a way that was so shocking. And I remember thinking, and I remember saying, actually, I'm sorry that you didn't trust me enough to believe that I wouldn't do to you what you were so willing to do to me.
Whoa.
Because it was right at that moment. It was right at that moment where it was like, that would have been it would have been another right of, you know, how you earn the respect.
The trust.
You earn trust.
Sure.
And that was a moment that required people who had really earned my trust and that I had earned theirs.
Wow.
And when it happened, when everything went down, I just thought, oh wow, like this was a pressure point moment.
Yeah.
And you were too short-sighted
That's right.
to see me from who you are.
Do you protect or do you profit?
Right.
What do you do in this situation?
Yeah.
And at the last second, what did he do? And what her mother said, which was so interesting, was, that's not how you parent. That's not how you parent.
Yeah.
Woo.
Like, people need to be told that, which clearly they do.
Right, but he was fine beforehand. It was so shocking.
Yeah. So we're talking about Harry and Meghan on Comeback with Erica Cobb. This is episode 3. So we get into, again, the racism and the history of the royal family. The scandal that you mentioned in episode 1 of Princess Michael of Kent, the blackamoor brooch, which is a racist piece of jewelry. It depicts racist imagery. You talked about the glorification of the institution of slavery in stately homes.
In art, in the art history of it. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine being Meghan. It's like me walking into a place and it's got a lot of like Nazi stuff.
So this
It's weird.
So this is where I was going with this, because unconscious bias, Harry said, starts as ignorance, but once it's pointed out, it's your responsibility to fix it.
Loved that.
And he addressed the scandal of him wearing the swastika.
For Halloween, just so everybody knows.
As a Jewish woman, did you feel that he had atoned for this mistake? Do you feel like he has learned and moved, and found it a teaching moment? What were your feelings on that?
I was going to be very upset with you, Erica, and I'll be 100% if they ignored it. My whole time, I'm watching bad boy, when's the swastika? When's this? So as a Jew, you're thinking this whole time. Now, he wore it as a party boy back in the day, and he did it as a joke. But if you don't know, his great-great-uncle, which I spoke about in episode 1, Edward VIII, who abdicated the throne, was with Hitler on his campground taking pictures with Wallace Simpson. They were Nazis in the British monarch. I can't emphasize that enough. Nazis and Queen Elizabeth and her family go hand in hand. I say that with respect. I'm not trying to defame anybody. It is factual. Factual. Now, the issue is he wore it, didn't understand the backfire. What do you want someone who did that to do? What do you really want as a Jew? What do I want a person who wore a swastika as a joke to a costume party? What do I want? I want them to accept it. I want them to realize it, say it out loud, and change. What did he do? All 4. Did I say 3? It might have been 3.
It's okay.
But I'm just saying, there's not much more you can ask. I can't ask him to redo it. It happened. He owned up to it on his own documentary, and he said, I can only know that I had an unconscious bias. And from then on, I learned. Isn't that what we're asking for people to do? Like, what else, other than changing the past, if you learn from your mistakes and you become a person that uses their platform for better, you've done your job. For me, I felt it was atoned.
Do you feel like they gave the swastika, horrific event? Do you feel like they gave it enough breath in this documentary?
I don't think they went into the history of the royal family and the Nazism. And if you go back, there's video of him with Hitler. There's pictures of Edward VIII with Hitler. That's his great-great uncle. That's who abdicated so Elizabeth became queen. If you hadn't, it should have been a part of it more. I will say that. Historically, Nazism, Hitler, the rise of the Third Reich, and the monarch should have been brought up in a way that I thought that the British colonialism was.
Yeah.
I feel like they messed up on that. Other than that, I was happy with it. But a little background and context would have been helpful.
Yeah, I thought that it was important that they brought it up.
Right.
I thought it was important for him to talk about how he met with rabbis and he visited Holocaust survivors and he visited actual concentration camps. I did think that it was a little quick.
A little blip.
Yeah.
It felt a little British PR. Let's move on. Or American, if you will. Right.
But then I kind of changed my mind about the significance of it being brought up in that way. And this is why. Because they were really painting a picture of who Harry became.
Yeah.
You know, his 10 years in the service, his 2 tours in Afghanistan. I thought bringing up him saying, you know, I was ignorant, I was ill-informed, I had learning to do. And then we show Stephen Lawrence.
This was the best.
The 25th anniversary memorial of a black man who was stabbed to death by racist white supremacists in London. Harry and Meghan attended the 25th memorial.
Huge.
And Afua Hirsch, again, she talked about Harry's journey and education to become anti-racist. Not racist.
That's right. Actively.
And the importance of the symbolism of them being there and lending their voice and support. And really, I thought this was a time where they were doubling down because we already knew that when Meghan brought up Me Too at the Royal Foundation event where she and Harry and William and Kate are sitting there, and that's when she found out, apparently, that the royal family's causes are deliberately non-controversial.
Always.
So for them to go, you know, following that, to go to Stephen Lawrence's memorial 25 years later, I thought that this was a way to put all of these things together to show the progression of someone who's been on both sides of it. He's done the wrong thing, and now he's working every day to actively do the right thing in consciousness because of his wrongs in really what we're assuming was not a conscious choice or rooted in education.
And may I add, when he walked in, there's a moment where you see them walk the funeral, right? Up to Stephen Lawrence's funeral. There was a sense of, I'm carrying the weight of my ancestors and what they've done, not that long ago, to these people. And I am going to carry it, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to speak. And I will say this, in Judaism, the biggest altruistic moment you can have, or the biggest mitzvah you can have, is holding as a pallbearer, because it's a gift you give to someone you can never get back. You're giving with it without any expectation. The person's dead.
Yeah.
Like holding my grandma, I knew she wasn't going to do anything back. That's the biggest favor you can give. And for him to have shown up at that funeral, I think, and I agree with you, I think it doubled down very quickly back on their panel, which you could dissect for 24 hours on that kind of weird dissection of those 4 people together. But them speaking, he almost spoke atoning for the entire British monarch in that one little eulogy. Does that make sense?
Well, I think
it was it was so interesting, it was so charged.
Yeah, I think to put it like into the context of what we're really witnessing was an atonement for what happened 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Because that's when Stephen was murdered.
Yeah.
And only 2 people out of the mob of, I believe there were 5, actually were brought to justice.
There was like very little justice there.
Very little justice.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was important that he and Meghan were there and also acknowledging that that was a mistake, another smear
Yes.
on the history of their country.
Talk about doubling down.
Yeah.
To bring up the fact that there wasn't a finished conclusion to this. There's still people out there that have done this. And as you watched people in the audience, you could see them so, I thought, thankful that that high of a person in government would make it to that funeral. I thought, you're right, that was a big moment in that documentary. And for her to have made the choice to also go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, well, we're winding down to episode 3, and we're really
Did you
getting
say
ready.
wine?
Yes, we're winding and winding down. Episode 3, and they're really prepping us for this is going to be the wedding, and then hit. So
Hit.
we are going to come
It's
back.
getting familial now. Now it's getting to the
Yes.
family. Now it's William. I want to know about William and Kate.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know about.
There's
How
so
they treated
much
them differently.
I want to know, but it's almost like I don't even know what questions to ask. It's going to be like a resolve of the feelings that I want to have by them being so vocal. So Harry said, I shouldered the relationship with her father, because if Meg wasn't with me, then her dad would still be her dad. And you know what? I said, I don't know if that's true.
What do you mean by that?
I feel like there would have been another opportunity. Maybe it was when she got her first leading role
to
in
leave.
an Oscar.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe it would have been, like she ended up with something that would have risen her star, because she's clearly a person destined to have a rising star.
Yeah, right.
So I don't believe that that Meghan or Harry should blame himself. I think that he would have found a way to sell her out at some point anyway.
Yeah, I think that in Buddhism and reincarnation and all that stuff, that was karma that was bound to happen.
Yeah.
Those karmic seeds hadn't been burned yet.
Well, you are listening to Come Back with Erica Cobb. This has been episode 3 of the Harry and Meghan on Netflix documentary, our recap with my guest host, Tory Shulman.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we will be back in a couple of days. We will be covering episode 4, 5, and 6.
I can't wait for this.
So write us on social media, give us a review, let us know what you think. Tory, where can we find you on social media?
At I am Tory Shulman. Again, there's no C in there. It's SHULMAN. And again, look for me on Twitter. But again, trying to find followers on Instagram. Fanning those flames.
Follow her on Instagram. I am at Erica Cobb. Erica like America. Cobb with 2 B's, like corn on the. So hit me up on social media. And as always, you can get the full podcast on comeback.tv/podcast. Thanks for listening.
Bye, guys. Cheerio.